All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, where myself, my co-host Steve here, take a look at what happened this week in the news, try to figure out if any of these headlines are worth trading off of, because as technical people and as kind of data-driven people, we want to take a look at the charts as opposed to what the news is telling us. So we dive in and we check that out. So starting with, we're a little bit of a follow-up, I guess a little bit of pat on the back, but a little bit of a follow-up here into Tesla, who had last week we were talking about this because it actually was gap down and the market didn't like Tesla when they had their robotaxi event. And then all of a sudden earnings came out and we've gapped up. And not only was it a strong day yesterday, I think I read somewhere it was $150 billion in market cap at it. And then a
Hmm.
continuation so far today. So I know I know you didn't read the earnings report or listen to it because I know you well
Yeah.
enough, Steve, but the price action I think is telling the story here.
Yeah, I was doing the live session yesterday for Trade Ideas, and somebody, had an option play working, and I said, there's probably going to be follow through. That's a giant gap up, and significantly. And you and I mentioned, I think we figured out early, and the market's figuring out too. This is not a car company. This is an AI robotics company and
Yeah.
software company as well. So. Probably a
Well,
lot of follow through, and it's probably just a continued, good news from here.
and I think a good tell on that it's the branch out is interesting. Is again, I'm not going to read the full earnings report, but was one thing was interesting is they missed on revenue, and I think they missed on earnings. So they sold less than what the street thought. But the reason that people are attributing for this gap up is that the future announcements of things that they were working on were more interesting than what actually occurred, right? Because generally speaking,
Mm.
you don't have $150 billion of market cap added when you sell less stuff than people want. So this is starting to trade a little bit more, I think, like a growth company, right? They're not taking, okay, you're making this much money, we're going to discount that to the current thing, and this is what your stock is worth. They're more saying, oh, these are the things that you're working on. We need to now value those a little bit higher. So a little bit of a shift. And what I just want to comment on the chart is I think these island reversals are rare patterns, right? So for those who don't know, iron island reversal is just technical pattern where you have a gap down or up, and then you have a number of days, maybe a week or so of just nothing really happening. Then you have a gap in the other direction. So it means that everybody who was shorting into this gap down is immediately wrong and very wrong. So even though
Show
the
the
short,
weekly.
yeah,
It probably is much more defined on the weekly.
yeah. So oh, you can't see the gap. That's the
Oh,
problem.
you can't see it.
Yeah.
Okay, darn. Okay.
But yeah, so you have a gap down, and then right starts to look like it's going to bleed out into the gap, and then it just gaps back up. So I would
Probably
imagine
have
what
to.
we're seeing here a little bit is a little bit of a short squeeze too. Right, a lot of people
Mhm.
probably got caught out here. They're on the back foot and need to go. I think with Tesla, it's pretty obvious, right? We have this, kind of 265 ish of resistance. It was resistance back in June or July, and then it was resistance back in September, and now we're back up here now. So I think the play for me would be pretty simple. Full disclosure, I just didn't. I should have said this last week. I own some Tesla. I have a rotation system that's fully automated. So I looked at my account and I have some Tesla, but um, yeah, I think 265 is the key. If we can hold above this 265 for a period of time, I think this monthly chart here that looks very interesting may resolve. We talked about this a little bit last week too, where we're like, listen, it's a bit of a choppy mess here on the monthly chart. It's probably not the time to really go crazy, but if we can start to break these prior highs right here, 275, maybe 300, I don't know, maybe shot at all-time highs after that.
Yeah, and again, just what you were saying on the onset, the revenues versus the increase in market cap. It's just people coming to that realization. Like we said, oh, this is a different company than we realized. So we're in a whole different model now. I think a lot of models were shifted after these earnings.
Yeah, and just to explain to the audience that they don't know is that there's a lot of quantitative trading that happens, right? And what they'll do is they'll put stocks in certain buckets, right? The stock we're going to talk about next, McDonald's, is a what they call a value stock, right? Where it's not. There's nothing going to happen that's going to make McDonald's double. They're not going to invent a new hamburger, right? You know generally what the revenues are going to be. You know generally what the profit's going to be. So it's more of just about little incremental changes they make here or there, and that's why the price reflects that. McDonald's doesn't get 50% up moves or 50% down moves. When you have something like Tesla, it looked like it was starting to be put into that bucket of, let's look at how much they're making. Let's do some sort of model off that. The problem with that is when you have companies that are inventing and growing new things, what they're making currently doesn't matter. It's the bet on if they will be successful making that thing going forward. So um, yeah, so far it looks like there is some kind of model repricing on. But as I alluded to, thank God I don't eat much at McDonald's, because yeah, there's a big, and I didn't
Me
get
either.
too much into the weeds, but I guess there was a big E. coli outbreak somewhere in
It
America.
traced it to some onion suppliers, some onions. I don't eat there either. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, so gap down overnight. The only thing I think about when I hear that is the whole Chipotle. I remember, and this might be dating me, but Chipotle had a giant
Mhm.
scare somewhere when the price
Way
was
long
way
ways
down
away.
here. So for the long run, didn't really affect them. But I think Chipotle, just to continue, I guess, the chat of growth versus value, Chipotle was a growth company at the time, right? They were adding new stores, they were building up, they were moving from there. McDonald's, they can't add new stores. There's McDonald's everywhere you go. So the question is, how long do you think that this is going to affect them? And is this a buy the dip? Is this a, or more like when we were talking about CrowdStrike and Boeing, where there might be more shoes to drop here?
It's not a buy the dip because I can already see what's happening. You have the gap down, you have some people playing for value, but
Hmm.
then you have the people that say, okay, that's the best we're going to get out of it. I want out of this stock. I call it the upside down horseshoe or the rainbow of death. If that price comes back down and challenges the low of that green candle, I think it's going to. That's just very, very bearish.
Yeah, it does look like a failed bounce. Looks like they mustered
Yeah.
an attempt. They hit that roughly 300 on the nose and reversed lower there. So yeah, at some point, it's one of those things. McDonald's, it certainly isn't going to go out of business, right? They're going to change their supplier. They're going to 6 months from now, everyone will probably have forgotten about this and moved on. Uh, but you just don't want to be the guy who's buying that falling knife. So if you want to use this discount to own a bit of McDonald's, even though it's really just where it was like late September. So it's not like it's down that much. Give it some time. Wait for
I would wait.
a base to form and then break higher. Wait for the moving averages to get underneath it. Wait for all this basic stuff that we talk about. Just don't buy it because hey, it's down 10%. It's McDonald's, I'm going to buy it. Yeah, wait for that shift to occur, and then I think maybe get involved there. Also, earnings in 2 days, so I'm sure they're going to address,
No,
right. You better you better believe the CEO has been prepped of, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do to fix it, it'll never happen again, this is the changes we're making to blah blah blah. But it will get
yep.
covered again 2 days.
I had Brian Shannon as a friend of mine. We had lunch in San Diego last Saturday. It was lovely to see him, and reminds me of another one of his axioms. Um, don't buy the dip. Watch the dip and wait for the confirmation.
Yeah,
Buy the confirmation of the dip,
yeah.
but don't just jump in and grab it because it's at a level. Watch it.
Yeah. And it's, again, you're not going to wake up one day and McDonald's going to be a $500 a share, right? It's not going to just, it's not, if you're looking to get involved, especially with a stock like this, you got plenty of time. Right? McDonald's isn't going to get FDA clearance on something, right? It's going to be turn, it's going to move slow, it's a slower moving stock, and then it goes from there. And that's all we had for news. However, Steve noticed something getting into the show that
Mm.
he wanted to talk about a little bit here on XLF. For those who don't know, XLF is just the financial sector. So take all your big banks, especially the big guys, your Goldman Sachs, your JP Morgans, all that, and you basket them up. And this is what XLF is. So what do you see in here, Steve?
Well, Andy nudged me earlier, and I don't like it at all. It actually got me out of a couple of week longs in my portfolio that weren't performing well in anticipation that if the Nasdaq and the S&P pay attention, Nasdaq starting to pull back a little bit after a good strong run. I just don't like seeing a giant red engulfing candle like that. We haven't closed yet. We still have a few hours in the day. I could be getting way ahead of myself. But if we come to Sunday and you guys are watching this and we've still got that same looking chart, that giant red engulfing candle after a big run, in banks on a Friday
Mm.
in October? No, thank you. I'm a little scared of that kind of omen that I see as a grizzled veteran. That's all.
Well, and I think the big kind of takeaway here is that we talk often about how you look at the news and then you look at the charts and you see what you think. In this case, what may be happening is the complete opposite, right? If we're kind of looking at the chart, and before we came on, me and Steve we were on different news sites. We went on Twitter, we went on a bunch of different places to say what's going on, and we can't find anything obvious that's happening. And even when I was looking at again the components of it, J.P. Morgan doesn't look that bad. Hasn't just sitting in a range. Nothing really happened there. Goldman Sachs,
C-
it's down a little bit. Gap
COF
up.
gapped up after news. You
COF,
know,
right? So
yeah, Capital
these
One
don't
Financial.
these don't look awful. So when you're seeing this occur, yeah, sometimes it's you look at the news first and you try to look at the chart and see if the chart's confirming the news. And sometimes you see the chart first and you go, there's probably going to be
Well,
something that comes out on this. I just don't know. I don't know what. I don't know when.
the the name I'm giving this chart is the shot across the bow. I mean, if we're to close right here, again, we could bounce right back up. This market has a funny way of doing that, but we're only halfway through the Friday as we're recording this. So if we close like that, you guys pull up the XLF on Sunday and it looks like that, that is a shot across the bow in October in the financials. And I don't want to be extremely bullish when I see something like that.
Yeah, not only a bearish engulfing, so a gap up and currently lower than yesterday's range, but engulfing the last 3 days of price action. For what was, a leader of the space. Financials have been doing phenomenal, right? They've been leading the rest of the entire market. So, yeah, who knows? Probably by the time you guys are seeing this, it will either have been a flash in the pan and the algos will come in and buy the dip, or there'll be some sort of news that hit that, maybe one of these financial companies is doing something improper or, it has something happening. But yeah, pay attention to financials for sure. Do you have any ideas to leave the people with? Do you have
Um,
anything you're watching going into next week?
Not really. I've just got some long-term positions I've talked about before. There's nothing really worth mentioning. I don't have a trade of the week picked. Again, the thing that is the most top of mind for me is what we just talked about in the XLF. So I'm going to be really watching that, see how that resolves through the day.
I'm gonna hit Bitcoin again. It's basically right where we talked about last week. Had a ugly day. I'll go to IBIT. Had an ugly day on Wednesday. Yeah, it looked bad for a second there, but basically, I guess for anyone tuning in, we're just looking at if you go on the pure Bitcoin chart, massive, beautiful cup and handle on this daily chart of just IBIT, which is the ETF. Just basically this, it's hitting near all-time highs, and it's got this nice channel. It had an ugly day on Wednesday that just got completely bought up out of the blue. And then we also saw earlier today the same kind of thing happen where, on
Mhm.
this, you can see it on IBIT, but on this candle right here, you had a, uh, sell right off the open for Bitcoin and then just got completely snatched up. Now it's below that again, uh, but just some interesting action where it does feel like there may be some dip buyers in crypto. One of the instruments I'm going to look at is this Wolf WULF. This came through a couple of the systems that I'm trading currently, right in this area right here, but it's just consolidating now right under these all-time highs. So this, I think the reason this one's so strong compared to the rest of the miner is because it has nuclear. And me and Steve have been talking about how
Mm.
nuclear has been on fire. What's happened, what Wolf is, their whole thing is that they're a Bitcoin miner, but they will only use green type things, right? And they list, solar, wind, nuclear, and hydro. So I think what's happening here a little bit is some of the algorithms picking up that word nuclear and then saying, oh, if they have access to nuclear power source, then we're going to ride them with the rest. So if this breaks out, then, or if Bitcoin breaks out, then I think this kind of 650 break on Wolf looks very interesting to me. Just
It's
be, yeah, consolidate here for some time.
We don't need to dig the headline up, but I saw one flash yesterday, maybe this morning. Some other power plant in Iowa, I think it was Iowa, was going to fire back up. Same thing we're talking about. You know, people are
Oh,
turning these plants, need nuclear energy back on. So interesting.
yeah.
Keep an eye on that. It's a big sector, I think, going forward.
Yeah, so I think you're getting a little bit of both here. I think you're getting maybe some Bitcoin action with Wolf, and you're getting some of this nuclear talk as well
Oh,
with Wolf. So I don't know, give it a shot. I think the trade for me is going to be pretty simple, right? Above 650, I want to get involved. If it closes back below six, time to go. Just I like things
uh,
that are very simple like that.
I will mention before we go, my book on crypto, as you guys know, I'm the XRP XLM guy. Things just continue to fall in place. You don't pay attention to the price action. I think you just look at the fundamentals and see, knowing what you hold for a possible future of cross-border payments. But the big news is there's just more and more ETFs being filed. I think by the first of the year, you guys will be able to be trading XRP as an ETF. So that's always a big thing.
Yeah, and that's what happened with Bitcoin too, right? First, you got tons and tons and tons of filings. They go back and
Mhm.
forth with the SEC for a little bit, make sure everything's dotted and ready to go, and then eventually it launches, right? So that'll be interesting to see on top of that, Ethereum and all of that. So awesome, guys. Well, again, as always, thanks for tuning in. If you made this long, give a like, give a thumbs up, all that kind of stuff. And I'll talk to you guys next week.